Good morning. Excuse me. Good morning. Happy New Year, and welcome to the Budget and Finance Committee. This is Tuesday, January 4th. We apologize for the brief delay in getting started, but we are ready to go. I'm calling the meeting to order. I'm the chairperson, Ann Brown. We have established a quorum. Every one of our members is here today. First item to take care of are the minutes from our previous meeting, which was November 16th, 2021. I have not received any comments, but I'll entertain them right now if anybody has any additions, corrections. If not, want consensus to accept these as written. Thank you very much, and I believe that was John Hobold who took those minutes. Today we have Anita DeGumbia, and as I always advertise, I will entertain applications to be a permanent secretary. I have not been swamped yet with people wanting the job, but so for right now, we're just moving it around. Our first order of business is to review our November 2021 financials, and I'll turn everything over to our treasurer, Pete Finelli.
Thanks, Ann. Good morning to committee members.
CFO, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Quickly, as a reminder, in previous BNF meetings, the financial statements were difficult for committee and audience members to see, and also difficult for me to highlight specific items with the laser pointer. So I've prepared a PowerPoint of the items with material dollar variances against the budget in prior year for both the current month and the year to date. As always, the full financials are attached to the agenda and are posted each month on the Sun City West website. Sections are divided into revenues and expenses to identify the operating cash inflow or outflow, and then comes the capital related entries, and finally the overall revenues against expenses. First slide is for revenues for the current month. You can see that against budget, similar to many other months this fiscal year, golf course fees and bowling continue to post solid revenues against our projections. Again, we are all pleased to see this, as it was not certain golf's resurgence would be sustaining, nor would bowling regain its popularity. Membership in November also exceeded budget materially due to solid tenant card and transfer fees. And special events saw a successful Fall Fest event posting. So overall revenues are up 167 grand versus budget and 267 versus prior year. Moving to expenses. A material variance for the current month existed for the most part only in wages and benefits, with a favorable 77,000 versus budget, due to in large part to openings in golf maintenance and landscaping. All other expenses combined had a variance of $11,000, and so therefore overall expenses were under budget by 88,000 and 37,000 higher than prior year, due in large part to inflationary pressures. So the overall operating margin for the current month was about 255,000 above budget and 230,000 against prior year. Moving to year to date, many of the categories have the same explanations as the current month. And so overall revenues year to date are up 535,000 against budget and 761,000 against prior year. Similar to revenues, the expenses have some of the same explanations, but labor, 337,000 favorable, again, due to those openings. The one item I would highlight is been explained many times, but the landscape maintenance did incur effect and findings of 280,000 requested and approved by the governing board due to extraordinary circumstances with the seed production. But so overall, the year to date, the expenses are 284,000 favorable against budget, despite that landscape maintenance impact, and 533,000 behind or greater than prior year. So the overall margin with year to date, 819,000 ahead of budget and 228,000 ahead of prior year. Any explanations on any of this? Mike, could you put up the capital-related slide, please? Oh, hey, John.
One question about the year-to-date. If you strip out that landscaping, it would appear that we're $550, over $500,000 ahead of expenses, on expenses.
Yes.
Am I reading that accurately?
Yeah, correct.
And that would be driven by all of these other components,
They are,
especially the golf, picking up from your comments. How are we doing with the maintenance of the golf courses, given that size of less labor? And is there anything we should be thinking about in future years about our staffing?
Well, that's an incredibly important question, and as you know, $10 million resides on that decision. Going back to the FNF that was presented, I think that was the highlight of it. Is many things are driven by that decision, and one of them was, are we going to retain the revenues and the rounds play, or are we willing to sacrifice that? And so far, it's been a resounding success, especially in outside play. I don't have the detail for that, but I think there's something more. APFs have continued to be strong. It's my opinion. It's not necessarily the correct one, but that the presentation of our rec centers and the golf courses is very appealing, and that investment, both in the past on the seed, but has been, I think, well worth it. It's a extremely important question what you're posing on the labor, and I wish I had the easy answer for you, but the movement of, so far, I should say, we got through the overseeding situation primarily by moving a lot of staff around. In years past, John, we've isolated some of our staff to perform some of the functions of the capital spend, which is to say these lake shores or leveling projects. Haven't had that benefit this year. So instead of deploying them towards some capital saving initiatives, we haven't had that. The worst news I think we've heard is if we're going to reach out even into some temporary stuff like registry or contract labor, as it's commonly known, those companies oftentimes are saying we don't even have staff even if we wanted to. So we worked during this last year to try some initiatives, especially in golf maintenance. I'm not saying it's a success yet because it's leveled off. I wouldn't call it, a problem gone away yet by any means. But we implemented some hazard pay initiatives for the golf maintenance and landscaping staff, anybody that worked in the outside environment for the last 2 summers, and it seems to have had some positive response. We did wage adjustments for those particular employees in the spring of last year by looking at it and made some adjustments. And this last year, the merit increase was at least partially improved to try to offset some of the inflationary pressures that we're seeing in both the minimum wage and the overall labor market. I really would defer that to Todd, Patty, if these are going to be successful. I do know one other item. I can't say they've successfully done this yet, but generally speaking, a lot of the golf maintenance positions have been in full-time, and that's a tough job. I mean, should be very thankful for everybody around this committee for what those golf maintenance people do for our association. But in the past, it's always seemed like it's been focused on full-timers. And, I do believe that some part-time element might appeal to some people, but, I don't want to work 40, 50 hours a week, but I might be willing to learn and help out. And I do believe we're starting to take some angles on that. It's critical, and as we approach the budget, I think this message is not here to be like parlayed in the budget yet, but you're going to be hearing about, what the wage pressures are doing to this, and we've been fortunate in the last, year to have had positive variance, to your point, and that's nice to see, but it comes at a risk, and we don't want to see it just collapse, and then what do we do about it? So we're trying to be proactive on that, and you might see some, wage pressures in our budget that need to be accounted for. So that'd be my preliminary budget comment, but, a great question, and I think it's important.
Thank you.
Hey, Gary.
Yeah. Bill, I think you may have some comments about a wage survey that you've been doing. But we were hiring at $13.86 an hour, and that's horribly inadequate. I can speak to Trailwoods because I've been involved in it a lot. He was down to 3 people. He's doubled it now. He's up to 6, and the 3% on top of the 1380. Now there's a rate above that, 14 something, that you can start people at if they've got any kind of experience whatsoever. But we know how difficult it is to get people in every venue today, whether it's waitresses, order takers, delivery people. So ours is even worse than that probably. So we got to get very creative and much more aggressive in recruiting rather than waiting for people to walk in the door. And I think that's where Bill's attention is. You may want to make some comments.
Thank you.
By the way, the quality of our courses is what drives that $2 million in outside play.
I agree.
I've talked to a lot of people. I play a lot of golf, talk to a lot of people. If I see and sense that they're outsiders, I go and ask them, what caused you to come here? Every one of them, great quality, very reasonable price. If we lose that, $2 million is at risk.
Exactly.
And I can just say ditto to a lot of that. I don't know if you can hear me with the mask on. But right, we are scrambling. I mean, it's a major concern of ours. Golf courses are one of our premier amenities here within Sun City West. I think Todd and his team do an absolute miracle work for us, providing the level and the ability of those golf courses to maintain the quality that they have. I mean, hats off to them. We do try to compensate them as best we can. Pete touched on the recruitment scenario where if we don't have to have our full-time golf technicians out there filling in washouts in desert areas from rain and those types of things, if we could get independent contractors out there doing some of the non-technical work, would be a huge advantage to us and our staff. And it's really unfortunate that, I mean, we have been aggressive in going out there and meeting with any and all when it comes to finding that type of contract labor. And like Pete touched on, they just don't exist. Those people are not there. And it's a very tough find for us. And that's the kind of the bind that puts us where we are. And so it really relies on a lot of maneuvering of staff and putting people where we need them, as opposed to having them focus on the particular courses that they normally work on. So they're moving around a lot, making sure that everything's kind of being taken care of. But you throw the virus on top of that, and we've got family sickness and we got employee sickness. And, over the course of the year, I think we had like 80 people down, and so it's reality. And we're just doing the best we can to make sure that these facilities all stay in the shape that you're anticipating them to be in. And it's a tough game right now. But we're working on it, and we'll get there.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody? Dick?
Bill, I come from a world where there's always shortages, and we have to be very creative with trying to recruit people. I may be naive in asking this question, but are we considering things like, even for our, the maintenance people that are on the golf courses, things like signing bonuses and retention bonuses and, from more of a financial perspective? I know that may work for trying to recruit people. I don't know what it's going to do when we start, issuing or having problems with people that have COVID and have to be isolated and that sort of thing. But from the perspective of recruitment,
Right.
Is that something we're considering or we could consider?
We could consider it. We have not yet. It's not really built into our financial scheme at the moment. We've kind of, like Pete talked about, we did evolve into, when it's 113 degrees out there and you're working, outdoors, we do initiate a hazard pay at this point in time, $1 an hour or so more to kind of keep them, aware of, we know what's going on out there. I think one of the bigger problems that we have is that oftentimes we have employees come in and you think of golf course maintenance as, God, it's beautiful out there, and if I could just sit on a mower and run around and trim grass all day, that's all there is to that job, and it's not. It's hard work, and so we have, I don't know how many, Marie's not here, how many people we've brought in that last a day. There are some people that last a few hours before they realize they're out. I'm not doing this, I can't do this type thing. And that's part of the problem with the part-time work here, because a lot of the part-time workers that we do employ here are owner members, associate members and whatnot, and average age of 74. And you put them out there in those kinds of working conditions, and it sounds good right now, but until reality hits, it's a tough fill. It is a tough fill. So yeah, we're open to any and all, but we have the same situation in Russ's line of work when it comes to facility maintenance. We have the same kind of thing when it comes to environmental services for the folks taking care of the streets, right-of-ways, and all of the landscaping that we have around our facilities. It's just not really a golf issue, but it's from the maintenance side, it's a tough fill right now.
Bill, have we given any consideration to possibly bringing in golf interns from ASU?
I'm sorry?
Have we considered bringing any interns in from the golf program at ASU that need to have an externship that are doing, getting their major in golf management?
Yes, we've done that. We've looked at from the superintendent perspective, bringing in students and those types of things, not only from ASU, but from Ottawa as well. Again, it's the time of day, it's the hours involved that's important, because we have to get our shift done so in time for the golfers to get out there, so we're out of their way. So oftentimes, our day starts at 4 a.m, so these guys can be out and gone at a reasonable time before it gets way, way too hot. And so that is somewhat of a formidable problem when you're talking about the student thing, because they have their classes scheduled about the same time in the mornings that we kind of need them. So, but we do recruit, and we are actively out there. And, with the ASU scenario, be it in Tempe, it's 40-mile drive, where these kids are residing from, and with the price of gas and, no public transportation at 4 a.m. to get out here, it's not that easy of a fill. But we are doing, we're turning up every stone we think we know how to try to recruit and bring people on. It's something we need to do. Sir?
Last spring, I saw some Ottawa golfers on the range, so I went over and talked to them about the possibility of working during the summer, because it'd be a nice way for them to fill in some blanks on their resumes, and they were both very excited about it. So I talked a little bit about the work, the wages, that sort of thing, and almost got to close, and one said, well, I'm going back to Finland next month, and the other one said, I'm going back to North Carolina. You got any friends over there that are going to be here this summer?
Yeah.
Well, we'll let them know and see what they think, but it is tough. It's really tough.
It is.
Bill, how competitive are we with the other golf courses? We have Sun City Grand, Portobello. I don't know how many golf courses we have, say, in the 10 or 15-mile radius. But, there's going to be competition for labor, as we all are aware. So I guess my question is, has anybody ever done a comparison to see how competitive our wages, our benefits, and working conditions are, so that we can come up with a plan to exceed or
Yeah.
meet at least? And have we done any kind of studies like that?
Pete, you want to touch?
Yes, actually, surprisingly, we're favorable on the two right around us, Sun City and Sun City Grand. I wanted to highlight one other item that we did, just to, because I brought this up, I think, 2 months ago, when the health insurance was facing a 20% increase. We knew that tacking the existing ratio of 20% more onto everybody's, including approximately 100 golf maintenance guys, would be, pretty much wiping out their merit increase. And so we made a decision to move the cost borne by the association to 85% and up from 80%. And essentially that mitigated the increase onto the employees, so that once again, I think we're doing some efforts to try to make sure that these people aren't hit by some market forces. In about a month, you guys are going to see the first iteration of the budget, and without casting too many what ifs onto your plate right now, the labor line is going to be a pretty high focus. So, and while you're correct, Gary, on the opening wage for golf, some of our wages at the 1380, it's not for the golf guys. I think there are one or two scales above that, but still, it's hard work. And you're going to hear this in a month, but when they can get $15 at virtually every fast food place, and every Fortune 500 company is alerting that their minimum wage is blank, we can't be living in an isolated world and not expect to react to that.
And I think, Richard, back to your question, I mean, we do offer a very, very healthy benefit package to our employees. And if you were to look at the longevity of our golf course and our environmental service workers, they're all long-term. It's not like we're losing people to go down the block for an extra $1 or $2. So I think our benefit package is there. I think once we have them locked in, they're here, and they do wonderful work for us, and we truly appreciate that. But it's that new recruitment, it's that new blood coming in, that's the challenge.
Agreed.
I would just, I don't want to belabor the conversation here, but I would just, and it sounds like you're as far ahead of the curve as you could possibly be with your thinking, but I would really encourage and want to offer any support from this committee that I can, a little bitty say, in that if we fall behind in that race, it's going to be very, very difficult to catch up from a budgetary point of view. And 2 years from now, people have short memories, and it just would pay us as a community to not let us get behind where we have a big hit, a big jump coming up that would be far less understood at the time. So keep up the good work, encourage it, and if you need any support from us, I think, put it on us.
Thank you. It's coming. He's right. Yeah. Well, thank you for that question, John. It was very valid. Moving to the capital-related portion of the income statement for the current month, I'm sorry, you did put
Slide 8 in that PowerPoint is where we were.
Yes, yeah. There are, yeah, actually, would you be willing to go to the, Mike, would you be willing to go to the one to the right of the slide, not to the slide, but the, yeah.
That's where it was.
Yeah, exactly. So the current year purchase orders of 5.7 million were approved. We've issued just about 3.9 million of POs. On closed and completed purchase orders, we've had about 99,000 of savings. There's just several items that have had no activity yet. That list shrinks, of course, every month. On our allowances, 395,000, issued 78,000 of purchase orders against that for a remaining balance of 317,000. And again, the same comment, this was a very, very busy slide. So I translated this into a little bit of a PowerPoint. This slide is intended to show the relative strength of the reserve fund valuation, both at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year against the fully funded balance. We began the fiscal year in July of this year at 58%. Projected inflows of about 6.3 million were budgeted. And you saw a few minutes ago that the operating cash flow was favorable by about 819,000. Investment earnings are projected to be right on at the budget amount, and an APF strength is 476,000 ahead of budget currently. On the outflows of 5.7 million, you saw earlier the 99,000 of savings year to date and 317 of unspent allowances. So we are projecting to have a funding percentage of about 55% without imputing the positive effect of the items identified above. Any questions on that part?
I'm not hearing any, Pete.
And I don't know why I'm missing a section. Someone can have to help me. What did I? Anyway, I guess, yeah. Any questions on any of that?
Any questions in the audience?
Madam Chairman.
Yes.
Pete, I looked at the APF fees, and I see they're trending very much in a positive direction. How much of those, and I know you won't have an answer today, but if our next meeting you could bring one, how many of those have come from captures from the REDS program via just regular sales?
I actually did have an update.
You're a god amongst us.
From the program for REDS, I think everyone knows, but it was initiated in February of 2020, and it allows us to capture the deed and title changes at the registered at Maricopa County, and that comes down as a daily basis. And then since many of our corporate, our association policies for APF or transfer fees or membership dues are predicated upon the status of the title ownership, knowing that brings that forward to us real time. And so it's benefited us by bringing a lot of that used to be delayed until, a transaction on the property occurred, or we'd find out about it by somebody coming up to try and get a rec card and like, who are you and where do you, so it's been almost 780,000 of favorable benefit. Again, most of that's just bringing it forward, but it's very valuable. And about 450,000 of that reflecting, roughly 150 properties, maybe a little less than 120 properties were associated with APF activity, and the rest was on dues and transfer fees and things like that.
Thank you, Pete.
Appreciate all that information, and now we'll move on to the presentation from CapTrust, who are our financial advisors, and we have, I'll let them introduce themselves to us today.
If I may interrupt them, I would like to recommend we forward the November financials for the governing board for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, George. You always keep me on task, and I appreciate that. Do I have consensus to move these forward?
Yes.
Thank you. Frank?
Thanks, Ann. My name is Frank Piles. For those of you I have not had the opportunity to meet, I'm here with my colleague and friend Nathan Erickson from CapTrust here in Phoenix. We're here to give an update on the capital reserve funds as a part of our fiduciary advisory role to oversee them. Just a brief agenda. We can go anywhere you'd like to go. If you have questions along the way, feel free to interrupt us. We're just going to do a quick recap of where we are since we last met with you in November. We've done some projections on income estimates for the portfolio, which we'll review. Nathan will review kind of some verbal talking points with respect to the markets as they ended the year 2021 and as we look forward to 2022. A little ahead of our typical marketing lead time to get slides, so you'll have to close your eyes and picture what we're going to talk about, as they typically don't have those ready until the 10th or 15th of the month. So just a brief update. This was the asset allocation we presented at the last committee meeting in November. Investing by the committee policies on diversification and following the guideline of the portfolio asset allocation that you previously had in place. Looking forward as of 12/28, pardon me, I didn't have a frog in my throat till I stood up to speak to everyone. Pardon me. Looking at the portfolio today, I'll ping pong back and forth just so you can kind of see the differences. All the underlying holdings are exactly the same. The portfolio has moved up from $28.8 million to $30.8 million. Thank you. I'd love to take credit for that $2 million increase, but as Pete would hold me accountable to, they did make an additional $1.9 million deposit in the early December timeframe or late November timeframe to bring that up. So the portfolio has kind of moved sideways. Going forward, we're going to have a quarter-over-quarter ongoing performance metric for you. We just needed to build a little time under our belts as we only recently took over the oversight of the portfolio. So I'm feeling good about the asset allocation. Not a whole lot has changed there. We're just kind of moving forward with respect to the same asset allocation with the additional funding as it came in. This is kind of a macro 30,000-foot view of the underlying portfolio and how it's allocated. Again, not a major shift, small basis point incremental movements between the portfolio from last time to this time. One thing that we did take on this quarter to review was some projected income. So we wanted to get a pro forma of what you might be able to expect, and I wouldn't hold this accountable to the penny, but using historical distributions and ratios and timing and frequency, we looked at the underlying holdings of the portfolio to really estimate where we believe you can expect to generate income by each individual holding going forward. And the bottom line on this portfolio is that we guesstimate about 1.5% in income going forward in 2022, which parlays into a roughly $458,000 kickoff of dividends and capital gains as we look across the entire underlying asset pool. That's not including any actual appreciation or depreciation in the underlying portfolio based off of market circumstances, but just an estimate of what income might look like. So I'll pause there. I want to check in with Pete to see kind of, as you've eyeballed this in the past, how does that sit consistent?
Well, thank you. Actually, it's 100% on the mark. John was part of our subcommittee a year ago on the decision to alter the ratio of our investments from 60-40 to 90-10. And for all of our modeling that we use for our reserve fund projections, we use about 1.5% yield off of the balance. So right now that's achieving essentially right at, and I think that's very valuable. We actually did have December activity, which involved a lot of long-term and short-term capitalizations, distributions, and posted close to 100 grand in December alone. So this is usually, I think, a very conservative approach. just basically dividends, and anything else beyond that would be to the upside.
I have a question. Pete, you mentioned or I think you might have mentioned 1.9 million going back into the reserve. Can you give me a sense of what that was? Were the APFs or?
What he's referencing is
Yeah.
actually our annual transfer, the one that was
End of year?
discussed. Yes, yeah, and I can highlight on that again, but it's in the minutes as to how it's calculated, and we just made the transfer by policy by December 31st. So we made that move out of the operating into the reserve funds.
That was our net for our last actual at the end of our fiscal year and after the audit, and that was our
So
net.
2 million good to the good, basically.
Yes,
That's right.
and whatever
Yeah.
that is, then.
I think that's
then-
an important piece to not just gloss over. So when you do your projections then, with the 1.5%, looking forward, I know we're new into this, if we start to beginning to have kind of a habit of something like that, will those roll into those projections?
Yeah, Mike, would you be willing to go to the capital that one to the left of that? Yeah, perfect.
I'm trying to remember if we talked about that in B&F or the board when that was, yeah, okay. But it was addressed that it would be, I mean, it was made a motion and everything to transfer that. Yeah,
So this right here is our long-term modeling, as I was referencing. Sorry, everybody. It's also in your books. Thank you, Mike. But right here is our investment earnings. And it doesn't say it in there. I used to put it in there, but the calculation is 1.5% of the balance. Essentially, the 28 million, 29 million will always create a 1.5% yield on the investment earnings. So it's in our modeling for how well we expect that to perform into the future and now.
Mark, would it be best to hold questions until you're finished? Or
Nope,
do you
fire
want
away.
to entertain them?
Fire away.
I'm just asking for maybe a little more insight into on the projected income. The lower half is where we have our 10%
That's right, yeah.
of equity. How are you calculating the projected income on that portion?
Yep, it's a great question. So as you'll see, the third column from the right is mostly filled with M's, Q's, and A's. That's the frequency with which payments are made. And you'll see most of the top half of the portfolio is the fixed income portion. As you look into the bottom half, you start to see the equity portion of the portfolio. Almost all fixed income holdings will pay on a monthly basis. As you move into the dividends of the equities, like the 500 index, for example, it pays more quarterly, and then the estimate on some of the other equity products, particularly those in the small cap and emerging market space, we only expect to see a de minimis portion of income coming on an annual basis in the form of capital gains, less from an actual dividend perspective. So the top half of the portfolio is going to drive a lion's share of the income in the portfolio as designed. What you could expect to see if you had reverted back to, or if you think back to the 60-40 portfolio that you had in place before the recent modification to 90-10, you would have seen probably a much greater appreciation in total value of the portfolio, but a much lower average annual generation of income. You've kind of flipped that on its head now, where it's 90% fixed income. As a result, a lion's share of the income coming in the portfolio is going to drip and drab every month, with big chunks coming from just the smaller equity portions on a quarterly or annual basis.
I think embedded in there was what I was looking for.
Okay.
Clearly, with the fixed income, it's dividends and very
That's right.
predictable. And I was trying to sniff around and see if there
Sure.
was any capital gains in that projected income, or if it's just dividend income on the equity portions.
Right, and the fortunate part for you with your structure as a nonprofit, even capital gains are not subject to taxation. There's no risk to that estimate. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think your point is that the capital gains are not a guarantee every year to be consistent. It'll depend on the performance of markets, but to Frank's point, it's a very small portion of the portfolio. So to the extent the capital gains distributions fluctuate, it shouldn't have a material impact on the overall income. You've got 90% in fixed income.
You can stop right there. You've answered my question in spades. And
All right.
safety
beat this
and
dead horse.
security,
No.
safety and security
Yes.
of other people's money.
That's right. Excellent. Okay. Here is the use your imagination portion of today's presentation. Usually, like I said, we would have slides that speak to what we're thinking about. Those are being finalized by our own CIO as we speak. Nathan influences some of that direction as an investment expert, so I'll defer to him on some kind of look back commentary, but also some look ahead.
Yeah, so it's interesting as I'm sitting here listening to your conversation. I think Sun City is a microcosm of the broader economy and what's been going on. So your revenues have been up. Corporate earnings were strong this year. Equity market performance was very strong. The U.S. equity market up about 27% in the large cap space. Small cap and international both above 10%. The only weak spot in equity markets was emerging markets. Again, a very tiny part of your overall portfolio, and greatly influenced by some of the regulatory changes that were happening in China. Fixed income was challenged this year, primarily driven by an increase in the 10-year yield very early in the year. So the broad aggregate bond market was down about 1% for the year. Looking ahead, it's hard to know whether we're going to see a continued increase in the long-term rates. But because of the strength of the economy, and particularly where inflation rates are right now, there is an expectation that the Federal Reserve is going to start pulling back some of the stimulus that they've had in place. What does that look like? Basically, the Fed owns government bonds, they own mortgage bonds. Every time one of those matures, they reinvest those proceeds into new government bonds and mortgage bonds, and they're going to slow that process down a bit. And so that's a little less stimulation to the economy. It's not necessarily pulling back completely. And there's expectation that they'll probably raise short-term rates 2 to 3 times in 2022. So hard to say what that does at the longer end of the yield curve or at the 10-year Treasury level, but certainly on the short end, that's kind of the expectation. Looking ahead, I think generally market participants are concerned about a couple of things. COVID is still a major issue. The spread of Omicron, if we start to see other variants, what does that do to the broader economy? I think generally in the U.S., except for maybe some pockets, nobody's taking drastic measures at this point that would have a broad economic impact. 2 other factors: inflation continues to be a concern, tracking around just under 7%. That was concentrated more so in a couple of sectors of the market. It's becoming more broad-based for all the reasons that you all are talking about right now. There's a labor shortage in this country. There's 11 million open jobs and 7 million people technically classified as unemployed. So you've got more job openings than people actually looking for work, and that's putting pressure on wages, which any good business, maybe not a nonprofit like yourself, but any good business will pass that cost on to the end consumer, which is going to increase the price of goods. I'm sure that's not your intention. You want, you have a benefit for all of your members, but certainly I think if labor costs get out of control, that starts to affect overall margins and profitability. So, from a projection of what to expect in the fixed income market, again, I think the portfolio is well positioned. It's more shorter duration. You should expect that income to be consistent. There might be some movement among price levels, but longer term, I wouldn't make huge adjustments to that. And the equity market, our view is that everything from a risk standpoint that we see today is already known. So we know about Omicron, we know about inflation, we know about labor shortages. What could cause problems in the equity market is probably something we don't know or don't see at this moment. So we could very well have another very strong year. Most people are saying temper your expectations. 8 of the last 10 years, we've had returns above 12% of the equity market. Logically, in your mind, you think, well, can that really persist? Is that reasonable to continue? You'd say no, But we've been saying that for the last several years, that you should temper your expectations, and yet the market keeps pushing forward. So I don't think we'd be surprised by a mid to high single digit equity return if nothing else changed, but could it be another 15+%? I can't argue that it couldn't. So again, barring some unknown that we don't see coming, it'll probably be, a decent year for all markets going forward. Yes, Anita.
Thank you for your presentation, first off. It's been very informative. My question to you is, I know our rate of return was about 1.5% is what you're estimating. How does that align with your other nonprofits, and is that a reasonable expectation for our type of entity?
Yeah, so I'd clarify that's not a rate of return at the portfolio level. That's the level of income we expect from distributions in the portfolio, a component of the overall return, but not the only driver. So we could also see some appreciation in the value of the underlying positions as well. As it relates to other nonprofits, your asset allocation is designed for your objectives and your risk tolerance. So it's hard for us to say you at 90% fixed income and 10% equity should be compared to somebody else at 70% equity and 30% fixed income. I think the key, as John pointed out, you're looking to protect these assets in case you need them in the future and drive a level of income that's appropriate. 1.5% is very good in today's environment.
I think slide 11 is a great slide to show the difference in how the portfolios might function.
Yeah, so we put this data together. I can switch it, never mind. So this is looking at rolling returns. And all that means is, if we're looking at 1 year periods, you can have a calendar year start in January, end in December. You can have another 12-month period start in February, end in the following January. And so you can kind of slice and dice data looking at month by month, but 1 year periods. And we go back all the way to 1950, but we give you an idea of different allocations. So on the far left, 0, 100, 1090, where you are today, far right, 60, 40. And what's kind of the best and worst case scenario? Most people want to know how bad could things get. They're fine if things are great. But you see in that 1090, the worst 1 year return historically was in March of 1980. So that would have been April of 79 through March of 80, where the portfolio was down just about 8%. You compare that to the worst 1 year period on a 60-40 on the far right, and you're talking about four times greater loss ending in February of 09. And what does that mean on I think we're using a $30 million portfolio here. It's the difference between 27 million and 21 million. That type of risk is probably unappealing for this organization and this portfolio. Even, a 7% return is challenging. You manage risk two ways, one with diversification, two with time. So if you look at the next page, if we go out 3 years, did this switch? Nope. And we talk about the worst 3 year period, 1.5% per year over 3 years. I'm at 28 million after 3 years as opposed to the 27 over 1 year. So you can see if I can endure a tough market, usually you can find your way out of it. The next page, 5 years, shows you, come on, 20 basis points per year over 5 years with this portfolio. So part of our job is to determine what's the maximum that this portfolio or this committee or this organization can withstand to stay invested in that tough market. Because the last thing you want to do is in the midst of a downturn, make a change that prohibits you from recovering when things get better. So it's always good for us, always good for you to test that again. We show you the worst 1 year period. Look, that's a rarity. Probably won't happen in the lifetime of your service on this board, but in the lifetime of this portfolio, yeah, it'll probably happen again where it's down 5% or 7% or something like that. And so it's, again, a good gut check to say, can we hold on in that moment? And it's always hardest in the moment because you don't see the returns coming later on, to stay committed to the strategy to benefit from the recovery. And if not, then then you should take some risk down. And now is the time to make that decision, not in the midst of the downturn.
Any other questions?
All
Do you have
right.
more?
We don't have any more.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, Frank and Nathan, I really appreciate you being here and enlightening us today. In the future, we will try to time your presentation so that it's after the 10th of the month following the end of a quarter. So we will probably see you again in mid to late April.
Okay. Yeah, the market commentary is way better with pictures, trust me.
Yes. Well, I appreciate you coming today, though, and giving us a presentation. And I will remind my committee members, if we feel like we need any further education, they have offered that as part of their services they provide either to committees or to the governing board. We could have a joint meeting even if we feel that. So that's something we should keep in the back of our mind. Thank you all so much, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year.
Appreciate the work you're doing for us. Pete is now going to give us some information on the work comp premiums.
And thank you. And I do want to apologize. I got confused when I saw the word capital. I moved to the capital purchase orders. And on the, Mike, on the financials off to the left, yeah, one left of there. And then go to one even further left. I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah, that one. So Ann, I think you were trying to alert me to this, and I don't know why I ignored your advisement. But in the wake of these gentlemen, it seems particularly that I shouldn't ignore this. But this is the capital-related portion of the income statement, and the APFs have been running strong. You can see that the realized and unrealized gains on the reserves can have immense volatility. 1 year ago, there was a 11% gain on the S&P in 1 month of November alone, and even the bond market went up by 1%. So a year ago, our $25 million portfolio gained almost $1.2 million in a single month. So year to date, our comps of a more mitigated, if you will, investment approach can have swings like that. But sometimes when they went to the downside, like $4 million decline in a 1 month period, as occurred in early 2020, that's just why we made the change. So overall capital related variance 237 favorable, 1,971,000 negative. I ignored that, and I just wanted to make sure you guys got all that. So moving to the section that you're wanted on the work comp. Yeah, sorry.
I did want to make one other comment when George brought up about the APFs and the reds. We are ahead this year on the APFs, but we did budget for the new houses through the Four Seasons development, and those are coming in now. I don't know if we've collected all of them yet, but that had already been budgeted for. So that is an increase in the fees, but it was in the budget to begin with.
Completely correct. The next one is part of the, if you look at the committee's charter, it asks for the information on our 3 insurance renewals every year. The health insurance I did several months ago. Our work comp is discussed right now, and then in a month or so, maybe about 2-3 months, you'll have the annual property casualty insurance. Work comp, no slides or anything. It simply was a renewal with CopperPoint. Good news is with the significant amount of people that were working from home now, or out of work during the pandemic peaks, the number of injuries, of course, went down considerably. So we were about 145,000 premium the year that we're in. The upcoming year declined to 129, and so good news on that front. So, any questions on that?
All I can say is it's very good
It's
news
one of
to
the
have over a
few-
10% decrease in insurance of any kind these days.
Correct.
And anybody have any other comments? Thank you so much, Pete. Item 3.04, concern policy F10, but these revisions pertain to charter clubs. They really do not belong with B and F. So if anyone was in our audience, not the physical audience here, but anyone in our video audience is wondering why we're not addressing this, it will be addressed today at the Charter Clubs Committee meeting. Is that 1 or 1:30, Donna? 1:30 today in this room. So that is a Charter Club issue. Moving along, we're going to policy C03, and let me get this up. And this is the charge of our standing committee. And what is being proposed to be added was by one of our committee members, that this committee shall review and accept the annual audited financial statements of the Association for Governing Board approval. Now, this is something we are currently doing, but we do not have it written down that we should do this. So I believe, Kathy, you're the one who brought this. This was just to make it formal that we would,
Correct.
that B and F would do this.
Correct.
It's not doing anything different than we're
Nope,
currently
not at all.
doing? Okay.
Yep, just needed to put it in writing, I think.
This just says that B and F will do this. This is something we traditionally do anyway, but now it's one of our charges of a standing committee. So I'll open it up to discussion from any of our committee members.
And I would recommend this be moved forward to the governing board for approval by them.
Thank you, George. We have a statement to move this forward. Does anyone?
I'd second that.
Kathy, second. Do we have any discussion? Do I have consensus that we will move this forward to the board workshop then?
Yes.
Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is looking at policy F02, and I believe that is up there. This is capital expenditures budgeting, and if you will recall, we've discussed in the past, this has come from some of the things with charter clubs, and what we in the past have had were pledges from clubs that they would make a payment. We are now saying that, and this is written now in a new 5.4, if the governing board approves a capital request item whereby Recreation Centers of Sun City West Charter Club has offered to provide financial support for the expenditure as shown by the general manager's source of project funds report under subsection 5.2, the chartered club will provide the funding to the association prior to the issuance of a purchase order for the item. These funds will be returned to the club if the project is canceled. So in other words, this is saying the association will have the money up front prior to any purchase order being issued and any project being initiated, whether this would be for a capital item or for remodeling, construction of any kind. So what this would do would insert a new, or put in a new 5.4, move the current 5.4 down to a 5.5. So it says capital projects requiring the general manager's capital project planning process shall be identified during approval under 5.3 above. That is nothing new. It is just replacing the order in which these are written. So I'd like to open this for discussion and see if this is something we want to move on.
Well, it makes sense to me. I mean, we had been talking about clubs having funding and getting it up front instead of after the fact.
So would you move that?
Yeah, I so move it.
Okay.
I would say.
Thank you. Do we have any discussion on this? This isn't anything new, but it is wording that, is this wording we got from our attorney? Yeah. This is wording from the attorney if anyone's questioning. Yes, Anita?
What is the effective date on this? Because I'm sure there are a number of clubs that have things ongoing right now that may fall into the dark hole type circle? Are we going to make an effective date of, say, July 1st? Or are we making it effective on the date of the governing board's approval? And if so, what happens in those instances where the clubs are in the process but have not gotten to that point of being able to put together this proposal? Yes, Carl, you have a
I was going to Carl next, so Carl's on the ball as always. Thank you, Carl.
A quick response to that is, I do not believe that we have any current projects scheduled for the current fiscal year that require any reimbursement from the clubs. So for
Carl?
this year, the books are clean.
Okay, excuse me. What was the result with the garden club that had said they would put money down that they had in their treasury for their project?
That project got fully approved by the governing board without any
Contribution?
assistance from the garden club.
Oh, that's right, because I voted against it. Okay, thank you.
And then the effective date would be governing board, just to follow up on any of this.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
when the governing board meets
As-
and approves.
as I'm aware of right now, there is one project that will be presented in the budget for 2022-23 that would have that, and that will fall under that. But good questions, thank you. Any other questions? Do I have consensus to move this forward to the governing board workshop? Yes. Thank you so much. Carl, you are up next with a 22-23 CIP review. Thank you.
Thank you for having me today. We haven't been together since November, so I hope everybody had a nice holiday break. I'm simply here just to give a courtesy review of the project planning process. The general manager has received the CFO's list of capital projects from all departments over the last month through conversations, things that have been discussed further by staff, and the fact that during the project planning process, you have approximately 2 months just to review the over $50,000 items. We do have some changes that I think we always want to have the transparency of sharing. So I'd like to start off with, you probably still have the list of everything from, $1 all the way up to the largest project provided back in November. But this list is just for the items above 50,000 and any changes. So starting off, I have asked the general manager and the CFO to include an additional project, which is the metal shop parking lot mill and resurface. This tentatively was scheduled for FY2023-24. After observing that parking lot and being there every day for the construction that's going on, it is not going to survive that time frame. I don't see the advantage of doing repairs. That would be a waste of money. So I have asked the CFO and general manager to bump that up in the project planning process 1 year, and next year include that for a full parking lot replacement, $52,000. The next item after that is the golf maintenance equipment. This is a dollar change. Originally, it was $1,169,481, so you are seeing a savings of $147,943, so that has been implemented in this change. The next line item is golf maintenance vehicles. Originally, it was at $284,360, so you're seeing a positive change of $50,167. And then Todd Patty has asked the CFO and general manager to include shoreline repairs for Grandview number 14, which is a variance increase of $177,000 to add that project to the overall CIP. And that is all I have, unless we have questions.
Can you tell us what the overall effect, the net effect of this is, up or down from what we saw originally?
I would have to ask Pete that. I don't have that.
Slightly up about 50 grand.
Slightly up about 50,000.
And just to clarify, the shoreline repairs for for those that golf, there's a series of lumber or wooden planks that are right adjacent to hole number 14 on Grandview. And Todd inspected that and is concerned for safety. It wasn't the intent to, for the reasons we brought up earlier, talking about golf maintenance not necessarily being tacked on any more additional responsibilities, but this one, he's concerned about it, so it was brought forward.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Committee members. Oh, Gary.
So Pete, is that a repair of existing logs as opposed to the 14 at Trail Ridge kind of wall replacement?
The shorelines are included in the, until the cycle through with the full riprap or the wall masonries. Once we do that, we take them off the reserve study, but there's probably 20 lakes that remain undone, and this is one of them.
So this will be the brick wall replacement?
It's not going to be the entire
No,
lake. I did talk to Todd about that. This is just going to be the one that's adjacent to the tee box.
Right.
Any other questions from committee members? Carl, we thank you.
One more thing.
Sure.
And again, this is the season where we do the next couple months of over 50,000. We had one item under 50,000, and that was also in the golf area, and it's the cart path slurry seal for $46,000 has been added to the budget. So that's not on this list, but I just wanted to.
And where is that?
That is at Echo Mesa.
Echo Mesa, okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And we appreciate the update, and I'm sure you'll be attending many of our meetings this spring.
Well, and I'm glad, just to highlight, Carl does a great job. I'm glad we're doing this here because, as you've already heard, and John, you elaborated, the operational budget, I think, is going to consume more discussion than in maybe past years. So it's good that the capital portion doesn't get such a yeoman's amount of the meeting in the future. So you're seeing it real time, and I doubt whether there'll be material changes come the first presentation. So.
Okay. Questions? Any other questions from the
Yeah, I
committee?
really just have a suggestion for the future in format. It would be, I forgot we had seen this, and then this was just some of those changes, but it would be helpful in the future maybe to have the length of the project, like 3 months or 2 weeks or whatever it is. Maybe the approximate project start date, because you don't really have a sense of that. Under the energy conservation, maybe the payback in years, so we have that. And then, of course, some subtotals, and then a total would be helpful too in that. You could probably just switch it this way and add a couple columns.
Thank you, Kathy. Any other?
Just to clarify, when we do get into the, I'm kind of contradicting myself a little bit, but when we do get into the actual budget presentations, every one of these items will have its own defined line item description. Some of those items will be highlighted.
Bill?
I'm waiting for the comment section.
Oh, comment section, okay.
Well,
I thought you were going to comment on this. John?
I'd like to just piggyback off those thoughts, and I don't want to steal any thunder about future capital work, but anything that could be, any visibility about facility shutdowns would be, I think, extremely helpful to the community. In addition to if you're adding columns, I don't know if you can get that in there, but the sooner we get that out in the air, the sooner people can weigh in on it. And typically, when that happens, the community arrives at better decisions.
John, does anyone else have comments on Carl's presentation just now? If not, I'm going to let I'm just going to kind of segue, and you kind of let us segue into committee comments. And I know Kathy has an idea that we had thrown around in November, and I believe she may come back with more in February for us.
Sure. I think I had mentioned in last meeting that one of the challenges, I think, as a community that we have capital projects and repair and replacement, and we never know the end of the story. So we don't know, did we come in budget, over budget? You know, what was the conclusion of it? And I'd like to suggest that we explore the possibility on an fiscal year basis, on an annual fiscal year basis, that all projects that have been completed begin to talk a little bit about how much, develop a format that can be consistent across the various repair and replace capital projects, et cetera, that give us a sense of how long did the project take, what were the costs, and then a little bit of the line items without going into enormous detail, but materials costs, labor costs, some of those bigger chunks that drive a budget. And I think it would be a nice transparency piece for the community to do that. I'd be happy to also discuss maybe how many bids were submitted, because that will tell us too whether we even had any choices in some of these costs or not, and the vendor selected. And then I know the staff probably already does a post-project review, but what was found out after the project was done, what would you have done differently in that? So some kind of an annual basis of projects completed. If the project isn't completed and goes into the next fiscal year, then it would show up in that next fiscal year.
Kathy, I really do appreciate all your comments. And I want you to know, and I want the community to know, that I value that as much as the question that you posed. And on a daily basis, I have that information tracked every single day, every single project, and to every detail that you actually asked. That is a live tool that we use as staff. The CFO has access to it, his accounting department has access to it, the general manager, and my direct report. So all that information is actually tracked every single day, including positives and savings and overspending. From a pre-planning budget, all the time frames are actually in this tracking tool as well. So if the question were to directly come up about the list of capital items for next year, I actually have those tracked. So that is information that could be shared at any given moment if that's the meeting that you would like to have, and I'd be happy to give that presentation.
Yeah, I would expect that you would have that, and that's good to know.
Wow, I'm not surprised, but I am impressed, Carl, that you have that. I'm wondering, how do we want to proceed with it? What was your intent, Kathy, if you proceeded
Well, I
with
think
this?
Well, I guess I'd hear from other committee members, but if it feels like a path that would be helpful to the community, I'd be happy to work with Carl and staff, or if we want a subcommittee, and start to think about what a presentation would look like where we could have some consistency in format and begin to educate the community as well as us in that.
Is this something that you see needs to be written into a policy? Or does anyone else think it does? I'm not sure it does, but I'd like to.
I'm not sure it has to be in a policy. It could be in a policy. It was kind of like reviewing the annual audit. We were doing it, and so let's put it in. If this becomes something that we do on a regular basis, then that's maybe when we forge forward on making it a policy. But I think we need to smooth out the edges here for a little bit until we understand exactly what's going to be helpful.
Okay, Anita?
Kathy, I think your suggestion is actually very good, and it will show transparency. And I'm just thinking from a forward, is it possible, or is it, I'm going off on my little corner of the world, but when we put something like this together, to, at the end of the year, have a separate icon on the website so people can go in and click and look at what we have accomplished. It will highlight the community. It will showcase what we're doing and how we're being proactive.
Could I add to that? I really like that idea. When you were talking about the report, my initial reaction was that's a bit granular. But once we start talking about let's lift it a little bit and make it transparent, I think that's part of our responsibility as committee to try to make this as transparent. People like to see this stuff, you know, instead of talking about, well, why in the world are they redoing the parking lot at a, you know, a parking lot? Well, we can show it. We can show this is how we planned it. This is what we think it's going to cost. This is how it's going to, and I don't think it has to be at a real granular level. I think it can be at, as we used to say, at 10,000 feet.
I always echo the transparency, and I'm actually going to take us back to my arrival in 2019. I found, as Carl and I are at the hip on 50% of my job, you know, translates into the reserve studies and the reserve funds and bringing forth the capital budgeting. And none of the capital projections were being disseminated at these BNF meetings. None. It was maybe sporadic. Transparency, we now do it every month for the savings. I'll grant you the granular level is not presented here. Twice or 2 times every month we do go to the granular level out on the website. Part of the financial reports is all the tracker, all the POs, all the spend. So you want to get to the, I mean, I'm not saying you as a committee, but if a person in general wants to, you know, reach that level of question, they can do it. As part of the rec center news, we present the financial statements. A section down below has any item over $100,000, shows the spend against the projection. Any of our question, I'm just going through the items you mentioned. If you want the bids to be verified, it's part of our purchase order. We have a summary sheet on every one of them that goes over that threshold, and you know, the competing bids are put behind the purchase order as well. So, you know, there are ways of being transparent, but I've actually, I think I brought this up to, you know, to Ann, is that, you know, did you want to get deeper into the capital spend? Do you see that as the BNF's purpose? And so it's a good discussion. I do think we do have as much transparency, I think, as you would hope for, but if you want to expound on it, I'm more than welcome to.
Having been on the golf committee for 6 years, I've seen Todd and his recaps. There's never a project that he's completed that he hasn't done that, and more often than not, it's a savings versus an overage. But it sounds to me like we have all the information that we're asking for. It's just a matter of how we're going to present it, who we're going to present it to, and what format it's going to take.
Correct.
Richard.
I kind of echo that. I'm sure Carl has Gantt charts that show exactly where the project's at. And I think we might want to look at it from the standpoint of the size of the project. If we're doing $5 million to replace the irrigation system, we need some granularity there. If we're going to redo the parking lot in R.H. Johnson, people would like to know when you're going to start, when you're going to finish, and how much inconvenience is going to be. So maybe we need to take a look at it from 2 timelines. One, the actual project, and second is the financial. The level of granularity, I think we need to decide, and maybe that will be predicated upon the size of the project itself.
I'll have to ask Carl. I don't remember if we, in our presentations of the 50,000 plus, if we put the expected date of start and all these other ones, but count on it. It will be in there now.
That hasn't come to the committee.
Yeah. But, you know, we do it, my accounting staff's here, and when we're doing our depreciation projections, we have all of these expected completion dates. So you're not asking for anything that we don't have available. So, yeah, for sure.
I'm wondering if for our next meeting, which is going to be on the 8th of February, if you and or Carl might just give us a little snapshot of some of this material. I don't want to put you to a lot of extra work. I know it's budget time, but if you could just show us what's out there, that might give us a starting point going forward. And I would throw out, I don't know who will be our treasurer next year because we will have new officers starting the 1st of July. But I would think that would be a good thing to do when we see our annual audit and the end of the year financials, that we include that also. I think that would be good information for our committee and also for our community.
And Ann, I have, because this is how I operate, typed up kind of some of the things I talked about. I'd be happy just to shoot through you, and you can shoot over if they want to just look at some of the thoughts.
That'd be good, thank you.
Yeah.
And I asked Carl and Pete, are we, it sounds like you have this information. Like I said, I'm not trying to make more work for any of you, but are we on the right track with what we're asking?
Yeah, that'd
You're,
be
you're
fine.
spot on, honestly. I mean, and that's why I value the information. This tracker is it's not a rec center or Sun City West thing that got handed to me. It's my years of experience just saying, I need to track these things because these questions do come up. And remember, over 5 years, I see a different committee every year. Everybody has a different piece of information they would like to have. So early on, as you kind of get used to it, especially 5 years ago when I started here, this wasn't a question. But the information was always collected and is always available. So, I live and die by it. It's important.
Well, that's good, and I would expect nothing less from you, Carl,
So-
because you've proven your professionalism with us in all of this. Pete, did you have any more you would like to add to this discussion?
Thank you, Mike. So out on the website, if you want to look at this, you'll go to news.
The very first thing I want to point out is this header right here, this rolling banner, this will pop up with his news as well. So when he posts the financials, he'll appear on that as well. Go ahead.
Very good, Mike. I agree. For the ones that aren't part of the Rec Center News, if you'll go to News, and then down in the bottom right, you'll see the posted financial reports. You pick October, and you'll see 4 categories. Capital tracking was the one I'd like you to focus on. So here's the detail. You'll see it was through October, right there at the top of the middle column, 44,000 is the savings. Here's all the detail of all the projects. And if you'll then continue to scroll down, the right side of the column is all our purchase orders issued. The middle column of the numbers should look familiar to 5.683 million is our budgeted items. Up to the further left of that is our encumbered items, carried over, if you will, from the previous years. And if you'll scroll down, that's the end of the lead page. Now our actual POs. And then after the POs are done, comes our actual spend on each project. So I guess this is, to condense all of that up into a presentation, I've got to give some thought of how we're going to do that, but I know we can, and if it's end of year type of discussion, that works. I wouldn't necessarily want to do this every month, but once a year to summarize what we've done, I think would be in great order.
And I think Richard's comments about what's the threshold, 100,000 or greater, whatever the magic kind of numbers that we see, because we don't necessarily approve the $10,000 item, and I'm not interested in seeing that detail, more in what we see, 100,000 and greater.
Well, and that's, Mike, if you would go to the homepage again, real briefly, and then we'll be done. Yeah, perfect. Now click on that scrolling Rec Center News, if you will. It was rotating. I don't know. Yeah, there it is, up in the upper right. Go to the right where you're at about. Yeah, keep going. One more over there. Click on that, and then. Is that actually? This is just the comments. Oh, perfect. Yeah.
It's a big PDF.
Gotcha. So just kind of scroll down until you see the financials page.
This just brings another.
Right there, perfect. So not only the financials, but of that orange and red down there is the highlight of all of our 100,000 plus items. How did they come in against budget? So again, another location for the transparency.
Well, looking at this, and I am familiar with some of that, not all of it, because you drilled one place I hadn't looked. I might suggest that as a community, that there be an opportunity to take people through the website and, you know, invite on such and such a, once a month or something, we're going to take you through all the information that's on the website and where it's located. That's a side comment, not related to this. I apologize, Ann, but it just popped into my head.
No, we're doing committee comments. And I think that's a great idea because we do have a lot of new residents or associates, tenants, whatever, coming in over the winter. And I think it would be a great way to introduce it to them. I'm not sure where this needs to go. Maybe to Katie, Sue, I'm looking at you. I'm looking for some guidance here. Any ideas? Carl?
I think we've collected all the notes from the comments and that fine balance between granular and 30,000 foot view. Mm-hmm. I think we really understand what you're looking for. Okay. My one final comment about discussing that with staff and coming up with a good presentation for you, mm-hmm. you know, in whatever the time frame be. The information's there. It's already there. It can be there in an easier format, 30,000 foot view. And then my last comment would be the information about scheduling. I value a open scheduling system. So putting out the information on best practices for scheduling is the information I'd like to give you. But based on how the economy is, availability in trades, that has to stay a bit flexible, providing the rules that we do definitely try to abide by. You know, not more than one pool closing at a time unless it's absolutely necessary.
Sure.
You know, the convenience to our membership is priority. I think I have displayed it. The questions came to me earlier on about, you know, how would you phase these projects? That has been honestly invaluable. We have taken a much deeper look on how we share that information out on phasing. So if you look at the website or the Sun City e-News, mm-hmm. you see on a weekly or monthly basis that phasing is actually being displayed as opposed to, hey, we're doing a project from January to March, but now there's a little bit more detail to it because we saw the value from the questions posed. So I hope that helps.
It does very much. And my most recent comment about maybe we need to involve Katie was about having a community forum to let people walk through how the website is structured, not just for the financial information, but a lot of the other things. And I don't know if we already have something like that in place or we have information available at the Owner Member Services office. I'm not sure how I even found out about it, but I've known it for so long that I can't remember my origin.
Okay, just an idea. We do have the 3 budget hearings that occur in the late spring for the next year's budget, and maybe at the beginning of each of those, we could give a brief little introduction as to where you can find this information. That might fit nicely into those presentations instead of creating a separate situation. Just
good idea. And
a potential.
I just had another idea as you were getting up to the podium is I believe we will have another newcomers event this spring. Is that?
Yes, that is scheduled.
And that might be something good if someone from the rec centers could be there with a computer and show people how they can get the rec center news. Something, even if you're here almost year round as I am, there's still a couple of months in the summer when I have to get the rec center news and I get it online.
Right.
And
that is a possibility at the newcomers. It's a little chaotic, you know, at people moving around, but it's another place to project those ideas if people stop at the station.
I don't think we can solve that today, so I think that staff just needs to go back and chew on it and figure out what works best.
Well, let's go back to committee comments. I'll just go around. Gary, you have any?
Just one. Probably going to be the most significant year that we've had in a long time regarding golf rates. All the conversation that's already taken place about the challenges we're going to have for the budget. We haven't increased rates the last couple of years, and to even take a dent out of the increase in expenses is going to take a lot of thought, a lot of comparative information from other communities. We're going to have to sell why we have to do this, and we do. But I understand the last golf committee meeting, there was a 20-minute conversation about taking range balls from 30 down to 26 and how upset people were. This is going to be probably the most contentious conversation we've had in a long time. So never too early to get started. I know Pat does a great job getting information from other places. They'll probably be reluctant to share a lot of that this year, but we're going to have to create a really strong selling package to minimize the amount of angst it's going to create in the community.
No comment, Ann. Just an excellent meeting as always.
Kathy?
I wondered why I was hitting less golf balls on the range.
Yeah, I kind of want to echo Gary's comments, because I think that this is going to be a really important cycle, budget cycle for us this year. I don't say I'm scared. I said I am concerned, and I want to pay particular attention to our budgeting, specifically the labor issues. And I think that we need to be prepared to defend and to try to explain what we've been doing, that we just didn't get caught with this, that we did see things coming. We are trying to address them. But I really want to be focused on what we're doing with specifically labor, because I think that is going to be a cardinal issue for us this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I have a compliment to lay on Carl, Pete, Mr. Schwind, and probably a host of other people. This is my third year on the Budget and Finance Committee, and the improvement in communication, the sophistication that's displayed in the capital budget, A to Z, including the work that's done, has done nothing but get better with every iteration. And I mean, it has really been dialed up in terms of the usefulness and the professional structure that's been added. So that's the compliment. The comment then is the discussion we've just been having, whether it be the operating budget that I think we all have some concerns about for going forward, and the capital budgeting, is just a continuation of something. We haven't hit the end of the journey, but we're sure racing down that road. So thanks to all.
Richard?
I'd just like to echo what Gary said. I think it's going to be a challenging year to do the budgets. There are a lot of unknowns. You know, you have your wage, inflation spirals, we have materials. I think we have to be as transparent as we can, and for people to understand that in certain cases, we're going to have to learn and adapt. We're not necessarily going to be able to optimize. As the situations evolve, as we become clearer, COVID kicks in, we're just going to have to learn to adapt to it. So again, I'm thinking it's less plan and optimize. It's going to be learn and adapt.
Thank you. George?
Thank you. A number of comments. First, this committee is so spot on in the years that I have served on committees and on the board. You are so spot on in getting things accomplished. The other thing I want to do is thank staff for the transparency. Even though we're looking for a piece of paper in front of us, put all together, the information is there and always has been, and we should be, as a community, extremely thankful of the transparency that the staff has provided us. And above all, I want to just thank Carl and Russ's group and the general manager for improving the stage here, because we're the first committee to use it without having to look over our shoulders to fall on our heads by a step around. And I just want to thank them for this. They did this seamlessly for us. And I cannot thank them enough for this. Guys, you're awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, and I echo that. You all may not have even realized what was done to the stage. I told Carl it was done so seamlessly that if you didn't realize there used to be a door there, now there's a door there, the changes that were made, you wouldn't recognize it, but it is a very nice addition, and it's a pleasure to be up here. So, Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Thank you very much. Kind of the word of the day that's been thrown out around here is transparency and unfortunately overage. And I'm here to talk about that a little bit. Recently, I have in front of me a facts and findings report that I will be presenting to the governing board coming up on January 14th, which is a workshop which will have a special session involved with that due to an instance that has come up in the world of Carl and Pete when it comes to capital improvements. And that is recently due to some cancellations of meetings and where we sit on the calendar, the way the clock runs, and how we have to get things sent in on particular times to fit into a schedule. Unfortunately, this piece of material did not land on your agenda today. So this is an informational piece for you. Due to open meeting law, we cannot really sit around and discuss it, other than the fact that I'm just alerting you in the world of transparency that this will be going forward just due to time constraints in Carl's world regarding a project that we've been working on for a while. When I landed here a couple of years ago, there were a couple of projects that really stuck out to me. One was the metal shop, where we had property. We weren't even using our own property over there. You know, we had to clean this thing up, and that was it was a safety concern and something we had to get done. The second project that has been kind of a thorn in my side has been the environmental services office space that Eduardo and his team of workers, approximately 27 of them, work out of on a daily basis. These folks don't even have a restroom. I don't know if you took the facility tour over there and got a firsthand visit as to what they're dealing with on a daily basis as far as how they operate and whatnot, but it really needs to be amended. The governing board approved that this fiscal year with some funding. Carl and his team went out and secured bids for getting this project renovated. And unfortunately, due to everything that has been talked about today, shortage of supply, shortage of labor, all of these things that we're kind of dealing with today have risen the price up and above what we had budgeted. And so this facts and findings report that will be presented to the governing board basically is going to request an additional $110,000 to complete this project. We've deliberated internally as far as how we should move forward with this. Carl has a list of projects that are going to extend through this fiscal year. Pete talked a little bit earlier today about the savings that we've already basically have accomplished in some completed projects. There are some assumption dollars in there that basically we're sitting on a pretty good balance thereof. Pete, I think, is keeping an eye on that, and moving this thing forward was a recommendation from staff and myself. And I'm kind of swinging for the fence on this one because I think it's really an important piece of work that really needs to happen. But I would like to move forward with this particular project. I didn't want to go to this meeting next week to the governing board without speaking to you. Like, we're not trying to run around this group at all. But really, it just did not make the agenda. Unfortunately, we didn't anticipate this being anything that we were not going to be able to fund our normal process way. So anyway, a little bit of a curveball. So we're seeking an additional $110,000 in funding to complete this project. So really no discussion, unfortunately, today. It will be presented to the governing board for approval. We could wait and go to the end of the month governing board, but the B&F committee meeting at the end of the month was recently canceled. And so we couldn't make that agenda either. And I know in Carl's world, timing is everything. And so we could sit on our hands for another month and do that. But again, prices vary, We have a contractor on board now with this particular price, and without taking too much more risk, I would really like to move this project forward. So just from a transparency world, from our end to you, I want to make sure you all knew what this presentation thing going forward was going to be. And then at the end of the year, if Pete and Carl come up with some projects, whether they're vehicle acquisitions, some other capital things that we can cut back on and move potentially into the next fiscal year, if the money is such that that Pete and Carl are really uptight about as far as where we sit financially, we can address those situations as they come forward. But as far as this particular project, to me personally, dealing with staff, which we talked about, how important these labor people are, they need to be taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And to the committee, this is not something that we pass muster on, yes or no, but it is an opportunity. Bill, if they want to ask you questions, are they? No, not really kosher to do that. Would it be better if anyone has questions to funnel them to me or to come to the board workshop? Or email. Okay. That's how we will handle it then. Do we have any questions or comments from members of our audience? It's rather limited today. I guess we didn't sell out. Do we have any virtual?
There's nothing on mine, no.
Nothing online. Okay. Well, I thank all of you for your attentiveness and due diligence to this committee today. It's 10:46. We are adjourning, and I will see you on February 8th. Thank you so much.